When speaking to bank treasurers, and of course off record, their answer was it was a very nice answer. And they're like, listen, Ariba, no matter what the fines are still less than the amount of money we've made.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम व्यूअर्स। प्रॉफिट की इस वीक के इशू के अंदर हमने हमारी बैंकिंग सेक्टर की रिपोर्टर रीबा शाहिद ने एक स्टोरी की है ऑन हाउ 8 banks took the SBP for a ride. Reba, could you briefly tell us what the story is all about, and then we can expand further?
So earlier this month, the state bank called in the bank treasurers for 8 banks, and they asked the 8 banks to explain their stance on what currency manipulation happened. And so this happened a few weeks ago. And our sources at the state bank tell us that they were called in and they were given an earful. And iski wajah bahut sari hai. Iski wajah primarily ye hai कि over the past few months, if you've seen, the currency has widely depreciated. And say for the past 2 weeks, say for the past 1.5 week, the currency depreciation was a concern for not only the state bank, but also the government. Shahbaz Sharif ne bhi us waqt ke apne finance minister ko bola tha to look into it. And then the state bank also did look into it, and they felt that some banks had got into malpractice or may have allegedly colluded to influence the market. तो हमारी जो बात हुई थी at sources with the state bank, तो उन्होंने ये बताया था कि anything that goes against the trend is investigated. So they didn't say that they found adequate proof to say that the banks did something wrong, or that they did not find adequate proof. That is not done yet, but they're looking into it. So banks had charged excess premium, or spread बहुत significant हो गया था. It had become higher than normal. तो ये problem चल रही है अभी.
Okay, so when we say speculation, so what just for a layman, कि currency market में अगर एक बैंक ने they've decided कि जी हम speculation भी करेंगे और हम let's say exchange rate को manipulate करेंगे. How would one go about that practice? What is the SBP specifically alleging here, and what happened in this case particularly?
So if you look back a few months, I think in early summer, what happened is that the state bank in June, it held a confidential meeting with a few treasurers. और उनको बोला गया कि आप जो हो run losses, but keep the exchange rate under control. Do not let it exceed. And bank treasurers were told that if they don't listen to the central bank, if they don't listen, then the bank CEOs are going to be called in for a dressing down as well. Lekin that did not really do its part. And then later on, a few weeks later, we saw that there was even news that PSO का जो एक LC है, it was being retired at a very high rate. So these things had started to happen. So the rate that these banks were giving to the consumers or to these companies or these commercial entities for retiring their LCs had exceeded the premium that is normal. So what that would do is that would create a panic sentiment in the market, and then the market would say कि चलो interbank में इतना है, तो then the open market should also follow suit and it should also rise significantly. So it made it seem like there's a shortage or severe shortage. And yes, there was a shortage temporarily, but you jab CRR increase kar diya, when the reserves, when banks had more liquidity, uske bawajood bhi shortage symptoms rahe. So the banks created a panic sentiment across the board.
Right. So in the last few months, जब से ये dollar aggressively appreciate हो रहा है against the PKR, so State Bank has made commercial banks take some very strict administrative measures. जिसमें LC को खोलना भी मना है, बहुत बड़ी LCs नहीं खोल सकते, और रिटायर करने में भी पाबंदियां हैं, इतने आराम से नहीं कर सकते थे. कम हो गया, but at the time that the time period we're discussing तब तो बहुत strict थी. So how did the SBP miss this such a big sort of, let's not call it a scandal, but whatever the banks were doing, it seems difficult for the SBP, who was scrutinizing every little dollar that was leaving the country, miss this big controversy or whatever was going on.
So it's like when when you confidentially call treasurers and tell them, listen, don't do this. So sometimes you turn a blind eye towards something else happening. So it might be that. But the rules in the State Bank manual are specifically there. The FE manual is there, and it says that unless otherwise directed, the State Bank, through the authorized dealers and money changes in exchange rates, are free to determine the exchange rates for conversion of Pakistani currency. So because the wording is unless otherwise stated, maybe that is one way that this happened. But in other sense, it could also be that, we were in a firefighting mode, and while the State Bank was looking at LCs and rationing of LCs and curtailing imports significantly, it may have missed out on this. However, it is surprising because the State Bank has more visibility on the interbank liquidity than the banks themselves.
Yeah. So, would it be fair to say that commercial banks and their profit-making entities, this was a profit-making opportunity? This might be how they look at it. Volatility में profit बनता है. State Bank जो है, being the regulator, it has to keep a check on them. इसके अंदर isn't जिनकी LCs थी, the commercial customers, aren't they the ones who have paid the most for this? In terms, it literally paid the most. जिनको ज़्यादा rates मिले import की LCs हैं.
Yeah, so the losers in this are the commercial entities that paid significant amounts, and the losers are also maybe the population, because of which the commercial entities found higher rates, and then as a result, the spillovers spread out to the interbank and in the open market. But if we were to say this, yes, banks are profit-making entities. They're answerable to their shareholders for making money. They are not here to help the government bring down the exchange rate if it goes against their business practices. So I feel that in the past as well, in 2021 December, when then finance minister said to the banks to bring down the T-bill rates, otherwise Kunda would happen. I feel that this was a similar situation where they were told to bring down the exchange rates, and the banks did not comply. So like we've mentioned in the story as well, it makes it feel like, you know what, you've shown your cards. So you've shown the banks that, listen, we need you to help us. So banks being banks, like, they're not called sharks for no reason. They took it up.
Right. So going forward, what sort of action do you think SBP will take? And do we have a number in mind in terms of how much the banks made out of this, and how much the SBP can possibly fine them for this?
So when speaking to bank treasurers, and of course off record, their answer was it was a very nice answer. And they're like, listen, Ariba, no matter what the fines are still less than the amount of money we've made. So the fines will always be smaller than the amount of money that the banks made. And if we've also added these graphs to our story, where some banks were able to make more money through their FX earnings in just one quarter compared to the whole calendar year last year. Like, for instance, ABL made 180% of what it made last year in just one quarter. HBL made 95%. That basically means that what they made in a year, they made in a quarter, which shows how significant this one quarter has been. So regardless of that, the fines that the State Bank may slap on them if they find out that they were wronged, will still be smaller than these earnings that have been made. But yeah, no, all of these earnings, however, just to note, do not all come from LC payments. So that is also something that we need to point out.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Riba.